just said that this is something very new that we are doing in D4N for the first time. We talk and hear a lot about research, but this time, in this session, we are talking about the human entity behind that research, the researcher itself. And to share that wisdom with us today, we are delighted to have Dr. Sunita Kadyala, who's a professor of global nutrition at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. Her research addresses the structural determinants of food and nutrition security in low and middle income countries. She leads landmark programs such as IMANA and the ANH Academy. She has a PhD from Tufts University, and her work experience across Africa and Asia has shaped global evidence, capacity, and partnership linking agriculture, nutrition, health, and climate. So I'm delighted to invite Sunita Kadyala on the stage for her research reflections. Can we have a round of applause?
Thank you, Isha, for that generous introduction, and thank you all for coming here. Thank you for the D4N colleagues here for inviting me to deliver this lecture today. I don't know how we are doing it. They all are looking very cool and chilled in organizing this very efficient conference from what we have observed and experienced since this morning. So congratulations to the team. Now, shifting gears. Eliminating all forms of malnutrition remains an unfinished agenda. At the same time, the landscape is changing and changing very rapidly in many different ways. These changes include climate change, dwindling planetary health, rising inequities, just to name a few. Responding to all these massive challenges for positive nutrition outcomes on the ground may seem elusive to many of us. Those of you who appreciate some form of art know that the more we engage with any form of artwork with intent, however clueless we might feel at first, or even pointless it may seem at first, the more one finds its meaning and purpose. Today, I will talk about my journey through some of the world's most pressing problems I have worked on, connecting the dots through many of my stumbles, leaps of faith, and showing up anyway, even when my journey got very choppy occasionally. So just to let you know where I originate from, I come from a very small village called Penumanchili in the coastal area of Andhra Pradesh in India. This was where I spent most of my life, and sometime in my 6th or 7th grade, my parents moved to Hyderabad. And most of you are familiar with households like this coming from South Asia. Many extended families and friends and extremely chaotic. But my mother was the only one who knew what was going on and had method to this madness. I was notorious in my family. If you ask anyone even now, remotely, who knew me remotely as a child or a teenager, this is what you would get. I was often described in several ways, like terror, rebellious, idealistic, impractical, argumentative. You get the gist. And I was very busy being a rebel in search of purpose. And at 18, I was clueless as to what to study at university. My only goal was not to study what everyone else was doing, like engineering, training to be a doctor or a lawyer in my families. But one day, someone I barely knew and I barely met ever since then came to our house and said she was doing a nutrition degree in a top-rated university in Gujarat. I maybe had one nutrition class in my 8th grade, but somehow I thought that was a fantastic idea to pursue. So there I went off to Gujarat, and my parents allowed, probably they were looking for a reprieve from me. So I went off there, where I finished my bachelor's, and I was still unsure what to do with my degree. In the infinite South Asian wisdom, I just went to study my master's as well, right there in nutrition science. I had a lot of growing up to do at university. The key thing I learned was that my opinion is not the only one that matters. Surprise, surprise to me. And Of course, I did some studying. I did science. I studied lots of science. I even had a publication from my master's dissertation on pharmacokinetics, I can spell that, of drugs and diet interactions from my master's degree. Clearly, this is not an important enough that we got only 4 views since then, and the journal does not exist anymore, and I take really no responsibility for it. So there I had my master's degree and was still not any wiser on what to do with my degree. At that time, my brother was looking to apply for a master's degree in engineering and requested several applications from United States. This disgruntled man is not my brother, but he looked equally disgruntled in those days. I thought once again, in my infinite cluelessness, I should just get a doctoral degree in nutrition. I applied to a few universities, took my GREs and did the usual bit, and I arrived here at Tufts University, where nutrition was indeed being approached as an agenda, bringing multiple disciplines to bear to improve nutrition outcomes on the ground, as envisioned by John Mayer in 1976, and we are in 2025 doing exactly what he envisioned for nutrition. The purpose of nutrition, it's worth taking a minute and actually read this quote, right? Nutrition must bring together not only biochemistry, but also social, agricultural, behavioral, economic, and communication disciplines to generate trusted science, cultivate future leaders, and achieve real-world impact. And look at this room. This is exactly the kind of people and the agenda that Jean Mayer was talking about all this while. Multidisciplinary research was the only way I was trained in, therefore that was easy for me, I must say. But then it's not just enough to get inspired, right? You have to continue to do your dissertation. That's why I went. It was a messy and challenging task, as most doctoral degree endeavors tend to be. So by 1998, in the absence of universal antiretroviral therapy rollout, 600,000 children became infected each year. 90% of these transmissions were from mother to child. And the 15% of this additional risk of HIV, when an infant was not breastfed, 15% of that additional risk was being breastfed by mothers who were not on ARVs. The recommendation was to then exclusively breastfeed mothers for under 6 months of age, until 6 months of age, unless replacement feeding was what was called AFAS, acceptable, affordable, feasible, scalable, and sustainable. After many months, so I was trying to study how mothers make decisions about this very complicated, sophisticated algorithm of making infant feeding decisions. After about 18 months of probably working on this in South Africa with University of KwaZulu-Natal and other partners, things did not work out as planned. So, ouch, that was a gutting stumble. My advisors basically said I should really shred that idea and get another dissertation somewhere, somehow. But of course, I was gutted, but little did I know that I would inspire Banksy eventually in shredding things. So serendipity struck when I took a leap of faith and went to Washington, D.C. to actually find another dissertation project where I was in fact offered a job, which was the foundational block of my career. So when I joined DC, I was working on this program called the Regional Network on AIDS, Livelihoods, and Food Security. It was a multi-stakeholder network in these 5 countries in Southern and Eastern Africa. What is quite interesting is that we were looking at HIV in what we call today systems thinking, as we were developing ways of thinking around it in 2000. The figure shows HIV at the epicenter with causes from macro to micro levels and consequences from micro to macro levels and potential responses at the bottom at all these levels. So our work showed that food insecurity, poor diet quality, and undernutrition status were associated with decreased HIV-related health outcomes, and we were beginning to realize that this could have grave implications for HIV care and treatment. So we worked with a big NGO called the AIDS Support Organization in Uganda, mostly in Gulu and Soroti, which is in the northern side of Uganda. And what we tried to do was to study the impact of food assistance program on ART-9 people living with HIV on their health and nutrition outcomes. And we found important implications for several outcomes and important impacts on several outcomes with implications for effectiveness of HIV care and treatment programs. So Renewal was of course evaluated externally and was credited with being instrumental in bringing nutrition and food security into issues of HIV programming, including declarations in World Health Assembly and UNGAS in around 2006 and 2007. Now, in 2008, I moved to India for personal reasons, where I met, well, the so famous, infamous Purnima Menon here, who also moved to IFPRI at the same time, around the same time from Cornell University. To give you a quick recap of where India was in that decade, India was experiencing rapid macroeconomic growth, but alarming rates of undernutrition and poor use of data in policy dialogue. There was huge trust deficit between various stakeholders, including of Purnima and I, who are we to come in now and talk about nutrition and what should be done and whatever. And IFPRI had no nutrition research portfolio in India at that time, so it was up to me, Purnima and I, to develop this nutrition research portfolio. So given this context, the key principles of Purnima's and my work was really spending a lot of time on trust building, building the coalitions of willing, and and convening and facilitating and participating in multi-stakeholder evidence-based dialogues across diverse sectors and disciplines. As a part of this, we initiated 2 programs, both well, it doesn't matter, I'm not bringing in funders, both funded by BMGF, okay. The first one here is Potion, and you are here because of Potion. The origin of D4N lies in Potion, and the other one was called Tackling Agriculture for Nutrition Disconnect in India, Tandi. I'm going to talk about the second one because it naturally segues into the rest of my career. As scientists from various disciplines and government departments, we've erected massive and prickly fences. And under Tandi, we wanted to understand how these were playing out in terms of our ability to overcome these disconnects, characterize them, and investigate. We were looking to see how we can make these, how we can make these fences at least less prickly so we can bridge these disconnects through transparent engagement of trusted science and policy leaders. The key outcome of that effort was that we ended up developing this consensus-driven framework called the Tandi framework, which is now quite often used both as a tool in bringing stakeholders together on discussions around agriculture and nutrition pathways, but also as a tool to inform research agendas. It looks complicated, but the idea was to look at these various pathways. I will not go into those details here. Now, I then moved to London for no real apparent reason other than the fact that I was at IFPRI for 11 and a half years by now. I randomly responded to an email in my inbox from a colleague at LSHTM asking me to circulate for this post, and I decided I'll apply. I got the job, and London was never on my radar first. I spent about maybe 2 days in my life in London before then. My children were 10 and 7 at the time, and my kids and I moved there to London first, with my husband following 2 or 2.5 years later. When I sounded disgruntled, which was quite common in the first few years of my move, my children politely and firmly reminded me that I got to make it work, just like they were. Anyway, since then, my work has been focused on two aspects. One is on designing and testing complex interventions, and the second is accelerating research in the area of food systems and nutrition through methods, metrics, sharing, and learning. Now, I'll first talk about the design of complex interventions, and I'll give you two examples. The first one is the UPA-1 trial, which was a 4-arm cluster randomized controlled trial in Odisha, which comprised of two components. One was participatory videos on nutrition-sensitive and nutrition-specific topics, as well as participatory learning and action as well in one of the arms. It was a big partnership, and often many of us who are in the room and outside of the room, we want to do the right thing. As Aarti has reminded, most of us are in the same boat, making the same journey. And the idea of decolonizing science, equitable partnerships, co-design, they are very heavy words. One of the key things we were trying to do this is really to how do you demystify that? How do you operationalize these constructs in practice? And here are three ways in which we try to do that. We developed a shared understanding of our purpose and complex concepts, consensus on the pathways to prioritize in this trial and develop a theory of change together, and consensus on how the co-design process will continue through the trial process. Of course, like many other trials and studies that were coming out by the end of UPA-1, we too, like other studies, showed that it impacted diet quality, but not on maternal or child anthropometry. I won't go into all those results. What I want to highlight here is, of course, we were very happy that we could deliver on a complex trial with high quality. But to me, and I bet for the entire UPA-1 family, equally important was the process in how we conducted that trial, with voice and equity across the board, mutual capacity sharing and strengthening, most importantly, celebrating what each of us brought to this endeavor. I definitely learned a lot about leadership and walking the talk of equitable partnerships much more mindfully and much more purposefully. The second example, which we are in the throes of it right now, is the infusion program, which again is a massive program in Bihar and Orissa with several partners. And what we are learning in the last 2-3 years is that although agriculture production to consumption pathways take us to some extent, most of the households needs 70 to 80% of households, 70 to 80% of the requirements of fruits, vegetables, animal source foods, which is the perishable nutrient-dense foods, come from local markets. But these markets look like this, with absolutely no infrastructure, no hygiene, no women's safety, and so on. What we are trying to do in Orissa, with Orissa and Bihar, with this large partnership, is to really co-design the process with stakeholders to improve the range of foods, improve hygiene, reduce food loss, make it gender transformative, and improve the demand for nutrition, for nutrient-rich foods. And we are just about to launch our trial called Sehat, which is a 2-arm cluster randomized control trial in Odisha, and it's registered. So if you're interested, you can take a look at this or just come and talk to me. Now, on to the second stream of work that has occupied over 12 years of my life is this. A key issue when I joined LSHTM in 2013 was the realization that there's a huge gap in methods and metrics, data, tools, and capacity in addressing these questions, which are critical for informing action. So there was an RFP by DFID at the time to address this gap, and we responded and I was a PI of that. And we operationalized this gap in the following 4 ways. One approach is that we do all the research at LSHTM, right? But no one institute can actually, and one partnership can fill the gap that is, evidence gap that is required to inform policy in any realistic, useful timeline. So what we did was to mobilize the global expertise wherever it existed in several different ways. One is on Imana grants, Imana fellowships to build a cadre of emerging leaders, the well-known Agriculture, Nutrition and Health Academy, which facilitates learning and sharing, and it's about 13,000 members now from 160 countries. And we also undertake strategic research between Tufts, LSHGM and Sheffield on emerging areas, really thinking through what is important the next 5 to 10 years. Now, we have had, over the last 10 years, we have been fortunate to see our grants, fellowships, our own research at LSHDM make some real-world impact. There's a lot of discussion yesterday in the side event and also here today, the morning, on policy impact. And I want to remind you that some of these impacts took over 8 years, from seeding of that method or metric and trying it out to doubling the minimum wage in Nigeria, Senegal's food-based dietary guidelines being informed by UPF tracking tool, which again was an Imana grant, and a major new policy in Pakistan to protect women's agriculture workers, which actually emerged from a consultation in ANH Academy Week 2017 in Kathmandu at Yak and Yeti, believe it or not. So many stories to tell from these gatherings and these dialogues and the impacts they have down the line. So questions that me and my team are consumed by is, how do we mobilize research on poorly understood or under-investigated issues pertaining to food systems and nutrition, broadly speaking. Again, I'll give you 2 examples here. The first one is really about food environments. This is one of our efforts on defining and measuring food environments in low and middle income country contexts, rather than in high income country contexts where this has gained traction. So we convened a group of experts armed by innovative evidence synthesis and our own research as well. This framework now is often used in several high-level policy fora, but spawned also a big research agenda, and now there are several tools and metrics available for measuring food environments. When I say consensus, it should not be confused with unanimous. Robust debates do continue on what should be on that framework, what shouldn't be. There is actually a version 2 of it. The robust debates are always welcome because that is how science advances. So we should always be open to that and see that as an opportunity and a really constructive challenge. The second one is perhaps the boldest foray I've ever done scientifically in my life to date. And it emerges again from Kathmandu to ANH 2017 Yak and Yeti experience of, we had this conference and I saw only glass bottles in the morning, and now I see lots of plastic bottles in the afternoon. But my colleagues and I were quite disgusted is the word, with how much plastic our conference generated. So we went back and we were scratching our heads, and somehow it spawned some curiosity, and we said, okay, let's dive into this and see what is possible. So we have undertaken a research agenda in the last few years. And here is a snapshot of one of the papers that is coming up in Lancet Planetary Health on really looking at global health burdens of plastics with a life cycle assessment approach, really assessing the impact as business as usual and under various scenarios to 2040. And our team, I must say I wasn't here, it was my team that was here, and that's how this was the UN Plastics Treaty negotiations, which really did not end anywhere like the way we would like to. But that is how policy, apparently, negotiations happen, and I bet maybe some of my team members are in that scrum as well. But we have been engaging quite actively, and for the first time in these rounds, human health was centered in discussions around plastics and impacts of plastics, which was, of course, environmentally driven, rightly so. So how do you actually make these efforts work? One of the key tricks to being effective is to unabashedly say, I don't know, right? Except when you should say, when you shouldn't be saying it, as this author helpfully reminds us. I didn't read that book, so don't ask me too much about it. But the key thing I and my team tend to do is to reach out to the experts from various disciplines. We are all working towards the ultimate goal of, say in this case, reducing plastic pollution, right? And there are other experts, the engineers, the endocrinologists, the toxicologists, the modelers. Reach out to them and build strong collaborations, and then just plunge in and, well, learn to swim before then, yes. So, but there is one huge caveat to make this work, and otherwise it is indeed quite a lethal thing to do, which is to have your team of superheroes. I have been fortunate to have so many superheroes, not just at LSHTM, who of course are there, some of my colleagues are here, but also from with the partners I work with, all the ANH Academy members, people in CGIR who I have worked with, and especially IFPRI, I have worked with earlier and continue to be partners in crime. So I've been really fortunate to have all these superheroes, which makes all these risks much more fun, because we can all sink or swim together, I suppose. So a key issue, which is the last part of my talk, really is about the massive concern to me and my teams in how we, the global experts, tend to conduct ourselves, right? We tend to get a seat at the table, and if we don't, we unabashedly jostle for space where important decisions are being made about research and policy investments that aim to impact countries and populations we aim to serve. Often, these tables, where decisions are being made about research and policy agenda, are not too distant from this formal dinner table you see. So what do global experts tend to do? We tend to set the menu well ahead of time. We value and invite guests that are very similar to us. We decide the seating order ahead of time, and even the conversations are quite carefully curated. While we are more mindful of diversity and representation, we have a long way to go in designing and fostering spaces that are level playing field, truly inclusive, with equity and inclusivity as the norm rather than an instrumental tool. After all, we all like dinners like this, right? With inclusive spaces, vibrant discussions among people from diverse walks of life, different ways of working, and valuing different forms of knowledge. Many of us try to walk this talk in our individual research studies. Mine and my team's efforts, especially in the last 12 years, have been to devise ways to elevate and be the change agent in my space, where some of the parts of our individual efforts are exponentially greater than the sum of the whole. So it is to this effect we established the Agriculture and Nutrition Academy, which is a global evidence platform accelerating actions to equitable and just food systems in this era of climate change and dwindling planetary health. As you can see here, there are many work streams, all of them working towards innovation in science, but also developing and nurturing cadre of emerging leaders, and the whole idea is to develop sustainable science and science to policy ecosystems. We are happy to talk to you further about it. So through the Academy, 2 other research studies I have undertaken, and with my partners along this path. Our efforts in science in the last decades have been as much about science as it has been, especially for me, my approach to my conduct as a scientist and as an educator. Being much more mindful about my positionality and consistently and being purposeful about equity and inclusion in my practice of science as well as education. I often think I'm the Hindu goddess like that with lots of hands. Many times I also dream of, having multiple heads, but often my life looks something like that. But thanks to the amazing and inspirational people in this journey that I have worked with, I stand before you today to tell you this story. A huge thanks and with much gratitude. Thank you. I go there, right? Yeah.
Wow. That was really wow. I also had something in mind while you were talking. You didn't touch upon in your presentation, but I was just thinking how gender sensitive or insensitive was the nutrition space when you entered, but maybe we can have a chat about that later. Now we have an exciting segment in this session where we have an early career researcher who has compiled questions from our oral and poster presenters, because most of them are either early career or mid-career researchers. And she will be here asking those questions to Sunita and getting the answers for all of us. And then, of course, we will open up the Q&A for all of you. So can I kindly invite Saroj, who's the founder and director of the Zeal Grid Foundation based in Bihar, India. Her work focuses on bridging the crucial health information gap among young women in rural communities. She's a Chevening scholar and brings over 7 years of experience in public health, social behavior change, and evidence-driven community programs. Over to you, Saroj.
Thank you, Professor Sunita, for such a wonderful presentation. And I think it was not even a presentation. It was a very wonderful journey that we will admire for long. So as Isha mentioned, I'm going to pose a couple of questions that we have consolidated and gathered from our audiences. The first question is, for early career researchers in the global south, especially those without access to foreign education or global networks, what does it truly take to build a meaningful, influential career in nutrition research?
I think this, I don't want to thank you for that question. I think came from the audience, right? Yeah, so thank you for that. It's an interesting question in this time and age, right? On one hand, you're seeing boundaries shrinking in terms of knowledge and information flows, the amount of training materials that are there online, but it is also not shrinking, right? Sometimes it's getting much harder, especially in the last few years, to actually cross boundaries physically. So, and education has become so expensive everywhere. But I like to say it is expensive everywhere in the world. What I encourage is that take advantage of fora like this. So, for example, here is an opportunity where you can find your next mentor, next aha moment. And actually in my journey, many of the big leaps I have taken are from very, very, very short conversations. And probably that person who had this conversation with me did not even know they had that impact on me. So it's really important to reach out. And one good thing is that my generation of, because the previous generation of our professors were very scary, I would say. But I think we are much more approachable. The culture of academia as well as research has changed quite a lot. So people are willing to talk to you. People are willing to, for the most part, willing to spend time with you, encourage you and be your champion. So don't be too shy in reaching out to that, and be dogged about that pursuit.
Thank you so much. Now, next I want to ask is, how do you balance the need for scientific rigor with the urgency to produce timely, actionable evidence for the fast-changing policy environments in South Asia?
I see that as a question that is, I don't think that there is no one policy impact, right? There is different things that are needed for various different kinds of policy needs. So for example, we heard about coverage surveys today, right, in the previous session. So coverage surveys can be quick. They can be, quick dip, because a ministry or the government, you have undertaken that because, you're being policy responsive. There are lots of schemes out there, and you want to know whether they're reaching people or not. Now, that is a quick and fast survey, right? You can have some bar graphs. You can do it by region, gender, economic status, and you can have a quick dip. So that's fast. Now, if you zoom out and you say, what are the determinants of that coverage? It takes longer, right? And that's a different policy need as well. Then if you want to look at the impact, that's even longer. And cost effectiveness, well, as longer as probably impact effectiveness. So there's different types of research for different users at different points of time. So you want to answer what is important for policy, if that's where you're going. But you also, certain things are not policy needs until there is evidence of that need as well. So sometimes you need to understand, we need to as scientists assess what the gaps are, why these gaps matter, and try to address those gaps. In which case, that it is a long run. As I said, some of the impacts, big policy impacts, they take 5 to 10 years. They're not going to happen in 2 to 3 years. So there is room for everybody at all these ends of research spectrum and different types of research. So I think you need to find what you want to do and what your mission is regarding that, and do that. And many times, it's not just one thing you do, right? You can be doing an RCT, long-term 5-year RCT in one place, but also doing coverage survey in another place. So all these things can coexist. I hope I answered that question.
Yes, you definitely did. And following up on this, I want to understand, and I'm sure our participants also want to know, that how do we ensure that the research findings are actually taken up by the policymakers, practitioners, and communities? If you can share something from your own journey, which I'm sure you have mentioned here, from Africa to Pakistan to India, you gave few examples. But if you would want to delve into one of those examples, can you explain in a little bit more? Policy, yes.
So there is a preponderance of policy impact, interesting, in this conference. I think I would say, and you had excellent discussions yesterday. I mean, those of you who didn't attend yesterday must be getting FOMO on what happened yesterday, was about how do you think of policy? And I may paraphrase some of the amazing things that people have said as well. One is, if you're a researcher, from a researcher's point of view, first from my end, is that you have to be the trusted researcher. You're only the trusted researcher, and you should be only trusted, or I should only be trusted, based on the quality of work I do. Is it good science? Does it follow grounded in the principles of good science? Right? We can't fudge around, and for researchers, that scientific quality and credibility is the only currency we have. Really, nothing else matters if we don't have that, right? So I think as scientists, we first of all, we need to get trained and understand what good science is, and get better and better at it. Define that credibility, and as I think Aarti was saying, credibility comes from not just pushing your own agenda, right? It's also looking at, okay, here is what my evidence says, but here are also what other kinds of studies also say. It might be very effective, but it may not be cost effective. Some of these things are, or it has an impact, but not big enough impact. So all these things need to be transparently communicated, not to mire other people in caveats and confuse the hell out of them like a limitation section in a journal article, but really, a policymaker will need to have they need to know what are the repercussions of their work, because they're really spending public funds, right? So I think we need to come from appreciation of the obligations and their responsibilities they have. Second thing, I also learned from the journalist Megha yesterday, was really about pitching and learning and creating this buzz around some of the important topics. And in this crowded world of digital media, it's very, very difficult. So one of the suggestions I heard yesterday, which I'm going to take upon her offer, is to really start working with the media as well in terms of how to think about documenting human stories. So you want this amazing, objective, both quantitative and qualitative data, telling human stories from the field. All those things apparently are quite important. And I can say that, I have no experience with media per se, but in my experience, it's really the credibility and scientific rigor and the trust people place in me as a scientist, in LSHTM or IFPRI, as institutes. And there is no shortcut to that. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. With this, I want to move forward with the next question. With AI tools expanding rapidly and the concerns about declining the research quality, how should early career researchers use AI responsibly while safeguarding scientific integrity?
Oh gosh, it feels like I'm in my classroom and setting examination questions. You know what we do now in setting exam questions and as setting assignments is literally we write an exam question, put it in there and say, can AI answer it? Then we are like, no, then we can't answer this question, ask this question. So somehow we are being forced to be smarter than AI, go figure that out, or at least, synthesize all this as AI. Here is what I want to pose is, the reason science is an endeavor of not just synthesis, right? It is about critical reasoning, critical thinking, and analytical mindset. Now, that is not something, it's like a muscle. Unless you exercise it, you lose it, period, right? I was this person who could navigate myself with no cell phone in Johannesburg or Mumbai or knowing nothing. Now, you ask me to cross a roundabout with Google Live View, I still get it wrong, right? Because it's a memory that it's a muscle I just lost, right? So it really happens. It's not like and a lot of people are like, well, I can use my time with something else. I'm like, I'm not seeing myself doing amazing things with this decluttered brain of my map reading. So critical reasoning and analytical thinking are two of the staples, pillars, fulcrums, foundation, whatever you want to call it. If they don't exist, science doesn't exist. The only way is to exercise it. Now, AI can help. It can help you with drudgery like anything else, right? Before we used to go to libraries, go through those stacks. Now came, amazing databases. You sit it with your laptop. Similarly, I understand it can write great code and, in R and things like that. So yes, I suggest use it for drudgery and efficiency, not to substitute your thinking. Otherwise, I guarantee that one who relies on AI for all the thinking would not be a credible, trusted researcher. And they will find themselves maybe ahead in a short term, but behind in the long term. So, yeah. And this is what we tell our students. Now, if they still want to go use the AI, I also say, you're spending so much money coming here. Why are you even, So it's their own responsibility in a way to be responsible about it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that. Before I take questions from the audiences, one last question that I have. How can early career researchers secure funding for research in environments where deliverables are prioritized over evidence generation? And this I'm talking about especially the individuals who are not associated with any organization but are passionate about research and bringing change.
Oh gosh, I really feel for you then. I don't know how to answer that question. I know what you're asking. In terms of research, and I know that my answer is a bit tangential, so I won't spend too much time. Just to say that I have never been in that position necessarily on where I was not allowed. My research was stymied because I was asked for all these deliverables, although I heard such stories and we were talking about that too in the afternoon. one of the ways in which I got out of some of that drudgery is making it more innovative, right? For example, very early on, like, or even now, when someone asks me for a baseline report, I'm not going to write 110 pages of baseline report. All I do is put some graphs, some scaffolding around it, because no one is actually going to read that report either. It's for someone else to file it away as well as their own deliverable to their boss. So just be smart around how to get around deliverables. Think innovatively about, can I just use graphs and figures and some 2 takeaway messages from that? I think IFPRI folks, I've seen them, are really smart around putting these slides together with 2 takeaway messages that one needs to get to and stuff. So don't sit and write paragraphs on those. So that can maybe help with freeing up some of your time. Yeah.
Absolutely. So if we have any questions from the audiences, you can please raise your hand, or you can come to the standing mics and you can take a couple of questions. Okay.
Hello. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sunita, for your excellent speech. It's very inspiring. I'm Prajwal, representing Micronutrient Forum. So I would like to know from you top 3 research priorities to focus in the next 30 years in nutrition. Thank you.
Okay, maybe we will take 2 more questions and then maybe Professor Sunita can answer them all together.
There's an online question. One was the same. How can nutrition program be, what was the most critical research gaps that needs attention? So that Prajwal has already asked. The other one was that how can nutrition programs be better designed to address gender inequities?
Yeah, so I have a question, and I've had the privilege of working alongside Sunita, and so seeing her every day, I know I should have asked at the school, but how, yeah, how do you keep up your energy despite, being involved everywhere? And the second question is like, in this time of funding cuts, how do we sustain the motivation to do more?
Top 3 research priorities, yes. Some of them may sound obvious to you. One of the things I was discussing with other colleagues and friends as well is, I was one of those people who said I work under nutrition, I don't work on NCDs unabashedly, right? And I was like, I'm not interested. Oh, by the way, I worked also as 3 months as a dietitian in a hospital in Hyderabad between when I was taking my GREs. And then I thought, oh my God, I cannot talk to another person about how they should not blah, 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 when they already know all the stuff, right? In a multi-specialty hospital. So, because I didn't want to work on NCDs, because I, like everyone else, maybe I just was, not everyone else, some people, maybe I was not appreciating the issue as many people already have. Because we thought that nutrition transition was like economic, this clean stages of transition, right? There's undernutrition, economies develop, and then there is NCDs that happen only later in life. Now, that's really not working out as we see it, right? So what we're observing on the field, as you all know much better than probably I do, is the proliferation of, there's several things. One is, of course, the proliferation of ultra-processed food in all forms, right? Being given to very, very young children and messing up with their metabolic system, metabolism in ways that they're going to present NCDs much, much earlier than we already do as South Asians. For example, we present diabetes earlier for the same BMI than many other counterparts. And it's going to worsen, and the burden of not just on health, of course on families and of course on that individual, but under economies, is going to be extremely huge. So we do not have the luxury to say, I'm this or that, right? Because both things coexist. So I do, and the way children are being fed, the meal patterns, everything is changing very rapidly. In the last 3-4 years, I can see it myself in Bihar and Odisha, where I tend to work quite a lot on the ground. So I do think we need to wrap our head around that. But also, the systems thinking is not just about food systems. I really don't work on other thing, now anymore. But the idea of physical space, right? And I mean, is it, if you're in Delhi, for example, or any of the top 10 polluted cities in India, in the world, is now the choice is between, do I die of lung cancer or do I sit and watch TV, have all the fun and die of heart attack? I mean, I'd rather choose the later, right? Anyone would. So I do think we need other sectors. We need women's safety. Women need to be able to walk somewhere, right? Even to a local market, which many people in Bihar and Orissa don't do because it's not safe to go. So there are many issues there as well in terms of physical activity, which is required, which requires safety in lots of different ways. One is physical safety, air pollution, so on and so forth. But definitely this idea is required. The second thing I think is environment, right? Somehow we are just not really thinking about it very much as we do. Climate change is getting good coverage, at least, even if not as much action as we need to. And we saw things happening in Sri Lanka, before that in Pakistan. I mean, there are many, many stories. So climate change is huge. It's here to stay. And it is happening. It's not happening in the future. And as I said, plastics, I'm not, and many other forms of pollution and environmental degradation that is happening. Our earth is already becoming inhabitable, and we are all in our la-la land right now. I'm not going to apologize for being an alarmist. We need to be alarmed, and I don't understand why we are not more alarmed. Had a third thing in my mind, which is about, let me have a think. Yeah, I took too much, so we can talk later. How do you make gender inequities? That's my work, yes. I mean, I do quite a lot of work on that. And our approach to that has been in basically participatory approaches. Really thinking through what it means what it means for women, what it means to be a woman in the society, and then building nutrition ideas around that, not the other way around. We need nutrition, therefore you women should blah, blah, blah. But one of the things we are doing currently is trying to understand creating ways in infusion, the one I was talking about, local markets, in demand, is how to get fathers more involved in nutrition space. And it's a balancing act, right? You do not want the woman to be stripped of her agency, her domain, things that she's proud to do, and we want to retain that. But we don't want all the drudgery of it left to the mother as well. And so what we are trying to do is get more involved in nutrition. And the other one is, how do you sustain funding? That's a tough one. We are living in gloomy times, I won't deny that. But these are also the times that I do think we are needed. So I do think we need to have that grit, I would say. More than ever, our profession, our expertise is very much needed, and you got to keep faith in that. I also like to think that I think the last 15 years probably were an anomaly in terms of the amount of funding that went into nutrition. So we all got rather used to it, right, including me. We were the luckiest, I think, my generation of professionals. We saw the surge of it. But before that, people didn't have that. We are going back to the old normal maybe, and we have to go back and talk to people working in the old normal and say, okay, how did they navigate? Because they have produced fantastic science, yeah, with lot less resources, and they manage that. So we need to, I don't have answers, but one of the things actually, I was thinking about this, and expecting this question, was that actually we need to talk to my professors and others where they worked with the paucity of funding and did amazing transformative work. So that's another one, yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Sunita. Just one last question, if we have, from the audiences, or else we will wrap up. Yeah, please.
Thank you. This is Afzal Hussain Bhuya from ID Bangladesh. Really, I should say, your speech is really amazing. We really inspired by your speech. Yeah? Just as you are actually as a research reflection, and you actually mentioned in research as well as in other extension areas. But so far we know in the developed countries, they are actually based on research and do many things based on the research findings, data, etc. But in the development sector, sometimes it is in our practical mind, the researchers, academicians, what they do, sometimes the policy makers, there is a difference. Sometimes they are not actually taking it as a positive way. Yeah, this is our practical experiences. So in that case, how, and even they argued that what the researchers and academics think, that is not actually practically addressed to the public needs and demands. So how you can actually, the research and academician and the policymaker should be in a same pace. Otherwise, it is really very difficult to implement. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so can I quickly...
I'm going to ask the last question. No, I'm not. I mean, you've had, firstly, absolutely amazing talk. I have goosebumps and whatnot. You've had such an incredible experience in institutions, really different types of institutions doing research, whether it's your own roles or the collaborations that you've held. There are many people in the room here today and in organizing and online who are sort of late career or mid to late career involved in shaping the institutions of the future. And so I was wondering if you had any thoughts on what needs to change there, or what are the kinds of things that people who are shaping those institutions for the future need to think about in terms of creating the environments that nurture the kind of talent we want to see. Thank you.
Absolutely. Wow, institutions, you're the one who shapes that. I shape research programs, but yeah, so I will answer in a short way. I think we did discuss how to, bridge this disconnect between science and policy. But I would like to pose another thing, which is I think perhaps you're doing a disservice by saying developing countries are less amenable to science than, say, the UK or the US. I would argue the otherwise. In fact, all the case studies we have seen in Nigeria, and I've only presented 3 here, yeah? And we have many more, please go to our website, there are many, and I have worked only in low and middle income countries, right? The global south, let me put it that way. And we have seen impacts there. Now, you come to UK, there are endless debates on, during COVID, should we have closed earlier? Should we have opened earlier? Should we have, there are endless debates on science, and those of, I'm in recording, so I'll be careful, but like those of the scientists that were in these SAGE groups and in these groups, they also talk about a lot of robust and sometimes rancorous debates on these very, very tough topics, right? So I wouldn't say that developing countries are actually behind in taking science into policy. I think everyone, in the end, human beings are human beings, institutions are institutions, and we all behave, the underlying ethos of incentives and movements of institutions, they're all the same. I think developing countries are quite hungry, in fact, because the challenges they face are quite pressing, right? So I am more optimistic than you are, I think, in this, and appreciative of how things move here. Yeah. How do I shape institutions? I don't know. I'm just me. The way I work is the core principles of showing up, right? And showing up for my team, my people, and I mean in the broadest of the sense, right? It could be my department, my nutrition group, or my department, or LSHTM, or whatever. I think one of the things that the countries in the global north are really advancing on and trying is to bring more inclusion and voice into their institutions. And it is an uphill task. But we are moving there, nearly not fast enough. And letting various voices thrive and really listening to them and celebrating them is important. Of course, there are the realities of the finance team, the procurement team, blah, blah, blah. Those will stay for the reasons that they are there in the first place. Another final point, if I may, in terms of funding and stuff, I think this is really important, which reminded me. Sorry, Poonam, I didn't do any justice to your answer in the interest of time. Is that, in fact, most funders, this is good news to you all, most funders now want to fund institutions in the global south. So all of us in the global north are having an angst and thinking, whoa, 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 I won't have any funding. What is my purpose? Should I work only in the UK? So, that is the kind of dialogues we are having. So if anything good has come out of this debacle we have seen in the last 1 year, is that actually more funding will flow through Global South. That is a given. That movement has already happened. So I think there is something to celebrate, guys, actually. And on that note, perhaps we have to end, yeah?
Thank you, Sunita. Thank you, Saroj. Can you come in the front for the photo?